It started as an ordinary Saturday, the kind that smelled of pancakes, new shoes, and promises. The sun rose softly over the city skyline, brushing golden light across the Grant family's glass mansion. Inside, a little girl named Luna, barely 7, small and wide-eyed, was trying to tie her shoelaces for the third time. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from excitement. Today, her new family was taking her to the mall. To most children, that might not sound like much. But for Luna, this day meant everything. It was her first real outing as Luna Grant, the newly adopted daughter of one of the richest men in the country. Mr. Alexander Grant, a man whose name opened doors, signed deals and built empires for weeks. Luna had been trying to get used to this strange new world. A house that echoed, servants who smiled but never stayed, a room filled with dolls she was too afraid to touch. She had spent her life in a small foster home on the city's edge, where the walls were cracked but the hugs were warm. Here everything was spotless, perfect, and silent. Mr. Grant was kind, though often busy. He spoke to her softly, like someone learning to handle something fragile. His wife, Mrs. Evelyn Grant, was polite, beautiful, graceful, but distant like a portrait that smiled only when the guests were watching. Their son Ethan was 12, tall, confident, and endlessly amused by Luna's shyness. He had the same golden brown hair as his mother, the same effortless charm, and Luna, with her dark curls, warm brown skin, and bright amber eyes, looked nothing like them. That morning, she stood before the tall mirror in her room, wearing the dress Evelyn had chosen, pale pink with a white ribbon tied around her waist. She twirled once, her reflection a mix of joy and disbelief. For a moment, she felt like she belonged. "Ready, sweetheart?" Mr. Grant's voice echoed from the hallway. She nodded quickly, grabbing her tiny purse. It wasn't about shopping for her. She just wanted to walk beside them, to hold her father's hand and be seen as part of the family. The mall was already alive when they arrived, a palace of glass and sound. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, neon lights blinked, and the smell of cinnamon and perfume floated through the air. Luna's eyes widened at everything: the glittering shop windows, the escalator moving like magic, the fountain that sang with falling coins. She reached for Ethan's hand, but he was already running ahead. Mrs. Grant followed him, her heels tapping perfectly against the marble floor. "Stay close to me," Mr. Grant said gently, offering his hand. Luna took it without hesitation. For that brief moment, the world felt right. They entered a high-end clothing store, the kind with quiet music and price tags that whispered numbers most people would never say out loud. Luna tried to keep her hands folded, afraid to touch anything. The saleswoman, elegant and perfectly dressed, greeted Mrs. Grant with a practiced smile. But when her eyes fell on Luna, that smile faltered, just slightly. "Good morning," Evelyn said smoothly. "We're looking for something new for Ethan, and perhaps a small jacket for her." The woman's gaze lingered on Luna's face, then flicked to Mr. Grant. "Of course. Your niece?" There was a pause, a long, heavy silence that stretched like cold glass between them. "No," Mr. Grant replied, his tone calm but firm. "My daughter." The woman blinked, caught between embarrassment and disbelief. "Oh, I see. My apologies." Luna didn't fully understand, but she felt the shift, the chill that spread through the room, the sudden awkwardness. She looked down, fiddling with her sleeve. Mr. Grant gently squeezed her shoulder, but Mrs. Grant's expression didn't change. As they browsed, whispers began to stir. Other shoppers, well-dressed women with perfect hair and sharp eyes, glanced at Luna, then at Evelyn, then at each other. Some whispered behind their hands. Others simply stared. Children her age pointed. One boy giggled and said something his mother quickly hushed. Luna didn't know why. She only knew that the air suddenly felt heavier. When Ethan came out of the fitting room wearing a sleek new jacket, everyone's attention shifted to him. The saleswoman gushed about how handsome he looked. Cameras flashed. Compliments filled the space like perfume. Luna stood near a corner mirror, watching the reflection of her new family. Tall, graceful, perfect, and then herself, small and brown, holding nothing but a little purse, and for the first time, she noticed how different she was. When Mrs. Grant turned to her, she smiled, but it was the kind of smile people wear when they're being watched. "Why don't you go look at the children's section, dear?" Luna nodded and walked slowly toward it. Every step felt like walking through glass. The saleswoman didn't follow her. The other children didn't smile. When she reached for a pink jacket, a woman nearby gently pulled her own child away. It was subtle, Highlandtown, but it broke something inside her. She stood there, staring at her reflection in the shop mirror, small, lost, and suddenly unsure if she really was what her father said she was, his daughter. Outside, she heard laughter, Ethan's bright and easy, Mrs. Grant's melodic and polite, Mr. Grant's deep and reassuring. Their world looked so golden, so untouchable, and she was a shadow standing just outside the light. When they finally left the store, bags in hand, Luna stayed quiet. Mr. Grant noticed. He crouched down beside her, brushing her curls gently aside. "You okay, sweetheart?" She forced a smile, the kind children give when they don't want to trouble the adults. "Yes, Daddy," she whispered, but deep down, something cold had settled in her heart. Not the kind of cold that winter brings, but the kind born of looks, whispers, and walls invisible yet unbreakable. That night, when the lights went out, Luna sat by her window, hugging her favorite doll, the only one that still felt like hers. She looked out at the city glittering below, and for the first time since her adoption, she wondered if love was enough to make her belong. She didn't know that the next day, the world would see her, truly see her, and everything would change again. The next morning, sunlight poured through the mansion's glass windows like liquid gold, spilling across the marble floors. But for Luna, the brightness brought no warmth. She sat quietly at the breakfast table, pushing her spoon in circles through her oatmeal. Mr. Grant was scrolling through his tablet, reading market reports and emails. Mrs. Grant sipped her coffee, her posture perfect, her gaze fixed on something far away. Ethan tapped on his phone, a quiet smirk on his lips, the usual rhythm of their mornings. Except today, the silence was heavier. Luna hadn't spoken since the mall. Mr. Grant looked up, noticing her small frown. "You're awfully quiet this morning, sweetheart. Didn't you sleep well?" She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. The bed was too soft. It wasn't the bed. It was the weight of yesterday. The stares, the whispers, the strange looks that told her she didn't belong. But how could she explain that to the man who had given her a home? Mrs. Grant spoke before Luna could answer further. "Alexander, I've been thinking," she said lightly, stirring her coffee. "Maybe next time we should take her somewhere less crowded, somewhere she won't feel overwhelmed." Her words were gentle, but beneath them, Luna could feel the cold truth, somewhere people wouldn't see her. Mr. Grant frowned slightly, not catching the undertone. "Overwhelmed? She did fine yesterday." Mrs. Grant smiled thinly. "Of course, dear. But you must admit, she draws attention. People notice," Ethan chuckled softly. "Yeah, everyone was staring yesterday. Some people even asked if she was like part of a charity program or something." Mrs. Grant shot him a look but didn't correct him. Luna's hand froze on her spoon. A lump rose in her throat. Charity. That word, so sharp, so heavy, made her chest ache. She pushed the bowl away quietly and excused herself from the table. Mr. Grant watched her go, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "Evelyn, what exactly happened at that store?" Mrs. Grant didn't meet his eyes. "Nothing significant. Just awkwardness. People talk, Alex, that's all." But it wasn't nothing, because while Mr. Grant went to his office that day, the whispers at the mall were still echoing. It began with a single photo. Someone had taken a picture. Mr. Grant standing beside Luna in the clothing store, her small hand in his, her dark curls against his crisp white suit. The caption read, "Billionaire philanthropist spotted with foster child. So sweet, with charity goals." Within hours it was shared hundreds of times. Then thousands, and soon the comments began. "She's adorable, but she doesn't really fit the Grant family aesthetic. Maybe he's helping her out. Good PR move." So heartwarming to see rich people giving back. No one seemed to consider that she wasn't a project. She was his daughter. By noon, the story had reached gossip pages. Bloggers called it the Grant adoption mystery. Paparazzi waited outside the Grant mansion gates, eager to capture another shot of the billionaire's charitable heart. When Mrs. Grant saw the articles, she went pale. She called her husband immediately. "Alexander, it's everywhere. The story's gone viral." Mr. Grant sighed, his voice calm but cold. "Let them talk. Let them talk? she repeated, disbelief sharpening her tone. They're mocking us, mocking you. And what do you think this will do to your company's image? Investors, board members, enough, he interrupted. She's our daughter. That's the only image that matters. But even as he said it, his jaw tightened, because he knew how cruel the world could be. When Luna came home from her afternoon walk with her nanny, she noticed men with cameras waiting by the gates. They shouted questions, flashes blinding her as she hid behind the nanny's skirt. Luna, over here. Smile, sweetheart. Are you happy with your new family? The questions made no sense, but the tone, loud, strange, greedy, and frightened her. She ran inside, tears stinging her eyes. Mr. Grant found her in the hallway, trembling. What happened? She shook her head, unable to speak. He turned toward the window and saw the flashes outside, a swarm of strangers feeding on his family's privacy. His hands clenched into fists. They crossed the line. Mrs. Grant appeared beside him, her face tight. Alexander, this is exactly what I was afraid of. He ignored her. I'll handle it. That evening, the Grant family tried to have dinner together. But the silence was thick, the air tense. Luna barely ate. Ethan played with his food. Evelyn's eyes darted between them, trying to maintain a mask of composure. Finally, Luna spoke, her voice small. Daddy? Mr. Grant looked up immediately. Yes, sweetheart? She hesitated, her lip trembling. Why do people look at me like that? The question hit him harder than any business rival ever could. He glanced at Evelyn, whose fork froze mid-air. She said nothing. Mr. Grant took a slow breath, then leaned closer to his daughter. Because they don't understand, Luna. Sometimes people fear what's different, but that doesn't mean you're wrong for being you. Her eyes welled up. But they don't stare at Ethan. He swallowed hard. Ethan has lived in this world his whole life. You just got here, sweetheart. They'll learn. She looked down at her plate. I don't think they want to. The room fell silent again. Later that night, Mr. Grant went to his study. The news had exploded. Hashtags, debates, even online panels discussing celebrity adoption ethics. His PR manager had sent dozens of messages. He turned off his phone. Then he opened his personal photo gallery, scrolling past images of his yachts, charity galas, board meetings, until he reached one taken just a week ago. Luna sitting on his lap, smiling as if the world was brand new. He realized, for the first time in years, that none of his wealth, power, or influence could shield a child from cruelty. And in that moment, a quiet resolve formed in him, cold, solid, and immovable. If the world wanted to humiliate his daughter, they would soon learn what it meant to cross Alexander Grant. But while the father plotted in silence, the storm outside grew. Overnight, a new video surfaced, captured by a bystander at the mall. It showed Luna reaching for a pink jacket, and the saleswoman turning away. It showed a mother pulling her child aside, and it showed the look on Luna's face. Confusion, shame, heartbreak, framed beneath the glittering lights of a luxury store. The video spread like wildfire, and with it came a new wave of voices. Louder, angrier, divided. Some defended the family. Others condemned them. But one thing was clear. Luna Grant, the billionaire's little girl, was no longer invisible. Tomorrow the world would see not a charity case, but a reckoning. Morning broke not with sunlight, but with headlines. Across every news feed, social media post, and gossip page, one video dominated. A shaky clip taken at the downtown luxury mall, showing a small black girl standing hesitantly near a rack of pink jackets while a store attendant turned her away. The caption was simple, but devastating. This child just wanted a coat. The staff thought she didn't belong. Within hours, it had been viewed over 12 million times. By noon, it wasn't just a video, it was a movement. Mr. Grant woke to his phone buzzing nonstop. His PR manager's voice burst through the speaker, urgent and cracking under pressure. Sir, the video's viral. Every outlet's picked it up. CNN, BBC, even foreign press. Hashtags are trending. Her leather shop. Luna Grant. Black child luxury. You need to make a statement now. Mr. Grant rubbed his temples, still in his robe, staring out at the city skyline. A statement? His voice was low, distant. They think this is about PR? Sir, people are calling for apologies, boycotts, interviews. He ended the call without replying. For the first time in years, Alexander Grant wasn't thinking like a billionaire. He wasn't thinking like a CEO or a public figure. He was thinking like a father, whose daughter had cried herself to sleep. Meanwhile, in her room, Luna sat by the window, watching birds land on the frosted garden hedge. She didn't understand what viral meant. She only knew that the world outside suddenly felt dangerous, noisy, and too big. Her nanny tried to distract her with stories, with toys, but Luna's eyes stayed distant. "Do they still hate me?" she whispered. The nanny paused. "No, sweetheart. They're just confused. People say mean things when they don't understand." Luna turned back to the glass. "Then maybe I should go away so they can stop talking." Those words reached the hallway where Mr. Grant stood silently listening. Something inside him broke at noon. He called a press conference, unannounced, unexpected, and utterly personal. Every journalist in the city scrambled to the Grant headquarters, crowding beneath the marble pillars of the skyscraper. Cameras flashed, microphones waved, whispers filled the air. When Alexander Grant appeared, he wasn't the polished executive everyone knew. No designer suit, no PR smile. Just a father with tired eyes and a voice like iron wrapped in sorrow. He stepped up to the podium, the murmurs fading instantly. "I've watched the video," he began, his tone calm but unyielding. "And I've read your comments. Every cruel, ignorant, and shameful one of them." The room went still. "My daughter's name is Luna Grant," he continued. "She is not a project. She is not a publicity stunt, and she is not a child of pity. She is my family, my blood and spirit, if not by birth, and anyone who questions her place in this family will answer to me personally." The words hit like thunder. Some journalists exchanged nervous looks. Others stared in awe. The billionaire's voice, steady and filled with conviction, carried a rare kind of truth, one that couldn't be scripted. He paused, then leaned slightly forward. "You know what surprises me?" His voice softened. "That in 2025 people still measure belonging by skin tone. That a child can be judged for walking beside her father because her reflection doesn't match his. If that's the world you're proud of, I'm not." The silence in the room was total. Later that afternoon, the footage of his speech spread across the internet like wildfire. Millions watched, shared, and commented. The public that once gossiped now fell quiet. The narrative began to change. Comments shifted from ridicule to reflection. This hit hard. The man's not just rich, and he's real. I cried when he said she's his family. We needed to hear that. Every parent should stand like this for their child. Even celebrities joined in. Hashtags changed tone. Luna Grant Strong, Father of the Year. Love has no color. But for Alexander, it wasn't about praise. It was about Luna, and making sure she never felt small again. That night, he entered her room quietly. Luna was sitting on the bed, a small stuffed bear in her hands, staring at the dark television screen. "Daddy," she whispered when she saw him. "Am I in trouble?" He smiled faintly, sitting beside her. "No, sweetheart, not you. The world's in trouble, for forgetting how to be kind." She frowned, confused.
"People were talking about me."
"On the computer," he nodded. "They were. But not all of them were bad. Some were trying to defend you. To tell the truth," her eyes widened. "The truth? That you belong here," he said softly. "That you are my daughter. Always." She blinked up at him. "Even if I don't look like you." He smiled. Not the practiced smile of a businessman, but something deeper, fragile. "Especially because you don't. You remind me that love isn't supposed to look one way." Luna leaned against him quietly. Outside, the night wind rustled the trees, calm, gentle, as if the world had exhaled. But while the internet moved on to news stories, not everyone forgot. The mall where it happened saw protests. People demanded justice for Luna, for every child who'd ever been made to feel less than human. The store issued an apology. The manager was fired. The saleswoman was suspended, yet none of it felt like victory. Because humiliation leaves a scar deeper than punishment. For Luna, the world had changed forever. Not in hate, but in awareness. She would grow up knowing what prejudice looked like, and what courage sounded like when her father spoke. And for Alexander Grant, something in him shifted too. He'd spent decades building empires. Now he wanted to build a legacy worth leaving behind. A legacy of compassion, because one little girl had shown him that all the wealth in the world meant nothing. if the world itself stayed poor in heart. That night, as Luna finally fell asleep, Alexander stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker below. The same streets that once whispered cruelty now hummed with a strange new respect, and somewhere deep down, he knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something powerful. Tomorrow would bring headlines, interviews, meetings, debates. But tonight, in the stillness of that mansion, all that mattered was a little girl's peace, and a father's silent vow that no one would ever make her feel small again. The Grant mansion had never been this quiet, usually. Dinner was a symphony of sounds, the clinking of silverware on fine china, the low hum of conversation, the occasional laughter echoing off the marble floors. But tonight, it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. The long dining table stretched endlessly under the soft light of a chandelier that cost more than most people's homes. Crystal glasses gleamed. Steam rose gently from untouched plates. The scent of roasted duck and truffle potatoes filled the air, but no one moved their fork. At the head of the table sat Alexander Grant, his face unreadable. Across from him, Luna sat small and quiet, her legs barely reaching the edge of her chair, eyes fixed on the napkin in her lap. To his left sat Evelyn, Alexander's sister, the woman who had invited everyone to that fateful mall trip. Her eyes were downcast, hands folded neatly, though the tremble in her fingers betrayed the calm mask she wore. No one spoke. The air was heavy with unspoken things. Finally, the butler, trying to rescue the moment, stepped forward. "Would you like me to pour the wine, sir?" Alexander raised a hand slightly. "Not tonight." His tone was low, but it cut through the silence like glass. The butler nodded and stepped back, disappearing into the shadows. The silence returned. Evelyn was the first to break. "Alex," she began softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You have to understand, I didn't—" He looked up slowly. "Didn't what?" Her throat tightened. "Didn't mean for things to happen that way. I didn't think people would what?" He interrupted again, calm but razor sharp. "Would see her as different? Would see her as less?" Luna's fork slipped from her hand with a small clatter. She froze, eyes darting to her father, afraid she'd done something wrong. Alexander's gaze softened instantly. "It's all right, sweetheart," he said quietly. "You're fine," but the calm didn't last long. He turned back to Evelyn. "You stood there," he said, his voice quieter now, which somehow made it worse. "You saw her being treated like she didn't belong. And you said nothing," Evelyn swallowed. "I froze, Alex. I didn't know what to do." "You do what any human being with a conscience would do," he replied, the steel returning to his tone. "You act." The table felt colder. For Luna, the grown-up's words blurred into a soft hum. She didn't understand every sentence, but she understood the feeling, the same hollow ache that had followed her home from the mall. She picked at her food silently, then glanced toward her father. "Daddy," she asked softly, "are you mad at Aunt Evelyn?" Alexander's shoulders dropped a little. He exhaled slowly. "No, Luna," he said after a pause. "I'm disappointed." Evelyn looked away, tears forming. "You have to understand, Alex," she said shakily. "People, they stared. Not just at her, at us. I didn't want to make it worse." He looked at her for a long time before answering. "You think silence makes it better?" Evelyn didn't answer. "Do you know what makes it worse?" He continued, pretending not to see. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was something heavier, grief wearing the mask of control. He turned toward Luna, forcing a smile. "You know what I used to think, sweetheart?" Luna tilted her head. "What?" "That the world changes through power," he said softly. "Through money. Through control." He paused. "But I was wrong. It changes when people like us decide not to stay quiet." Luna looked thoughtful for a long moment. Then she said in her tiny, serious voice, "Then I'll talk next time." Evelyn covered her mouth, stifling a sob. Alexander reached across the table, taking his daughter's small hand in his. "I hope there isn't a next time," he said gently. "But if there is, I'll be right beside you." Dinner ended in fragments, plates half-eaten, emotions left unfinished. Later, Evelyn stood in the hallway, her heels clicking softly against the marble. "Alex," she called out as he passed. "For what it's worth." "I'm sorry." He stopped, turning halfway toward her. "Don't be sorry to me," he said quietly. "Be sorry to her. And to every kid who's been made to feel small for no reason at all." He walked away, leaving her in the flickering light of the hall's chandeliers, a silent witness to the weight of her own guilt. Upstairs, Luna sat in her bed again, hugging her stuffed bear. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the wind against the glass. When Alexander entered, she looked up sleepily. "Daddy, why are people mean?" He sat down beside her, brushing her hair back gently. Because sometimes they're afraid of what they don't understand. She thought about that for a while. Then should I make them understand? He smiled faintly. Maybe not all of them. But some, yes. With kindness. Luna nodded, satisfied with that answer, and snuggled deeper into her blanket. "Will you stay here until I sleep?" He smiled. "Always." Downstairs, the mansion remained still. A house built on power, now echoing with lessons money could never buy. In one night, Alexander Grant had discovered something profound. That silence, even from good people, can be the loudest cruelty of all. He stood by the window of his study, long after Luna had fallen asleep. The city lights glittering far below. The same world that had mocked his daughter now adored her. But admiration wasn't the goal. Change was. He poured himself a glass of water, staring at his reflection in the glass. "What kind of father am I," he murmured, "if I let the world stay this way?" And somewhere in the darkness a decision began to form, one that would ripple far beyond his own family. Because tomorrow, Alexander Grant wasn't just going to speak. He was going to act. The mansion woke before the sun did. Phones buzzed in the hallways. The housekeeper whispered urgently into her earpiece. The driver's radio blared updates from every major network. Something was happening. Something that couldn't be ignored. By dawn, a crowd had gathered outside the Grant estate. Reporters, camera crews, and curious onlookers filled the street, bundled in coats, their breaths visible in the crisp morning air. At the heart of the noise, inside the mansion, Alexander Grant stood before a mirror, adjusting the cuffs of his charcoal suit. His reflection looked calm, but his eyes betrayed the storm within. Today would not be about apologies. It would be about accountability. Behind him, Luna peeked through the slightly open door. She had her teddy bear tucked under one arm, her curls still wild from sleep. "Daddy?" she asked softly. "Why are there so many people outside?" He turned, kneeling down so their eyes met. "They're here to listen," he said gently. She frowned. "To what?" He smiled faintly. "To the truth." The press conference wasn't at his corporate headquarters this time. It was at the mall, the same mall. The same polished marble floors. The same luxury store where everything began. When the convoy of black cars pulled up, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted his name. Security guards rushed to hold the crowd back, and social media live streams exploded in viewership. Inside the mall, the store stood empty, its windows dark, its logo half removed. A sign on the door read, "Closed indefinitely." Alexander walked past it without a glance and stopped in front of the central atrium where a podium had been hastily set up. Behind him hung a massive banner that read, "Every child belongs." The murmurs quieted as he stepped up to the microphone. His voice, when it came, was steady, not loud, not emotional, just full of a quiet conviction that silenced even the most cynical journalist. "Yesterday, this mall became a symbol of something I refused to accept," he began. "A symbol of exclusion, of ignorance, of how quickly we forget that decency costs nothing." He paused, letting the words settle. "When a child, my child, was humiliated here, it wasn't just her dignity that was insulted. It was every parent's faith in the idea of fairness, every person's belief that kindness still matters." The crowd was silent. Even the usual clicking of cameras had stopped. "I've spent decades building companies," he continued, his tone sharpening. "But if all my success can't buy a world where a little girl is treated as human, then it means nothing." He took a breath. "So I'm not asking for apologies. I'm building something better." A ripple of confusion passed through the audience, then he revealed it. "Starting today, I'm launching the Luna Initiative, a foundation dedicated to equality and access. For children of every color, every background, every home, to make sure no child ever feels small because of who they are." Gasps, murmurs, flashes. He continued, his eyes glinting with determination. "We'll fund scholarships, diversity training, and community programs in every city where we do business. And we'll start here, by turning this mall into the first inclusive learning and recreation center for underprivileged youth." A reporter called out, "Mr. Grant, are you saying you're buying them all?" He smiled faintly. "Not buying," he said. "Rebuilding." Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then thunderous. But behind the cameras, another storm brewed. The very people who once mocked his daughter online were now scrambling to align themselves with the movement. Brands issued public statements. Influencers changed their profile pictures. Hashtags flooded the internet. Your every child belongs to the Luna Initiative. Your kindness is power. Yet for Alexander, it wasn't about publicity. It was about purpose. After the conference, he returned home exhausted but lighter. As he stepped into the quiet of the mansion, he saw Luna sitting in the living room surrounded by sketchbooks. "What are you drawing?" he asked. She held up a crayon drawing of two figures, one tall, one small, holding hands under a big sun. Above them, in shaky letters, she had written, "Daddy and me." He smiled, his eyes misting. "It's perfect." She looked up innocently. "Did the bad people say sorry?" He thought for a long moment before answering. "Some did. Some won't, but that's okay. We don't need them to say sorry to move forward." "Then we won?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "We didn't win, sweetheart. We changed the rules." That night, the story led every news broadcast, not as a scandal, but as a transformation. "The billionaire who turned humiliation into hope," one headline read. "A child's courage that changed an empire," said another. But beyond the headlines, in homes across the country, something small but powerful began to happen. Parents talked to their children about empathy. Teachers brought up Luna's story in classrooms. People started looking inward, questioning their own silence, their own bias, and in that quiet revolution, the world shifted just a little closer to kindness. Later that evening, as the snow began to fall outside the grand windows, Alexander tucked Luna into bed. She yawned and asked, "Daddy, what will we do tomorrow?" He smiled. "Tomorrow we build something new." She nodded sleepily. "Something where everyone belongs?" "Exactly." As she drifted off, he sat beside her, staring out at the falling snow. The world outside was still flawed, messy, complicated, sometimes cruel. But for the first time in a long time, Alexander Grant felt peace. Because one act of love, one stand for what was right, had started something bigger than both of them. And in that still night, as the snow blanketed the earth in white, it felt like the world itself was trying to start over. The next morning, sunlight spilled through Luna's window, painting soft gold patterns across her bedspread. It was one of those rare mornings where everything felt still, as if the universe itself had paused to watch something pure unfold. The house was unusually quiet. No buzzing phones, no hurried footsteps, no distant murmurs of business calls. Just the distant hum of life outside, birds, wind, and the faint clinking of breakfast being prepared in the kitchen. Luna blinked awake, hugging her pillow, feeling that wonderful confusion between dream and reality. But this time the dream didn't fade, it stayed. Because for once life had changed in a way she could feel. Downstairs, the morning news played softly on the TV. Yesterday, billionaire philanthropist Alexander Grant announced the launch of the Luna Initiative. Inspiring a global movement for inclusivity and equality, the announcer's tone was warm, reverent, the kind reserved for world-changing moments. Luna didn't understand everything they said, but she caught one thing: her name. She smiled sleepily. "That's me," she whispered to herself, her small voice filling the empty room like music. In the kitchen, Alexander sat at the table, coffee untouched. His laptop screen glowed with hundreds of unread messages, some from government officials, others from business partners, and countless from strangers. But one email sat open, unread yet seen a dozen times. It was from the store manager, the woman who had humiliated Luna. "Mr. Grant, I want to apologize directly to you and your daughter. I have no excuse for what I did. I acted out of prejudice, not professionalism. I've resigned. But more than that, I want to help. Please let me volunteer for the Luna Initiative. I need to make this right." Alexander didn't reply immediately. He simply leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the sunlight dancing across the floor. Forgiveness was complicated. But he'd learned something from Luna. that true change wasn't born from punishment but from understanding. He typed a brief reply, "Help if you mean it. That's all that matters." Then he hit send. Later that day, he and Luna drove back to the city, not to the mall, but to the construction site where the new community center would soon rise. The lot buzzed with workers, trucks and architects holding blueprints. A massive signboard stood near the entrance covered by a white sheet. Luna clutched his hand as they approached. The site manager handed Alexander the rope with a grin. "Would you like to do the honors?" He nodded and looked down at Luna. "Want to help me?" She nodded eagerly. Together they pulled the rope, and the sheet fell away to reveal the sign, "The Luna Center where every child belongs." The crowd erupted into applause, but all Luna saw was her name, in bright, proud letters, high above the world that once told her she didn't belong. Her small hand tightened around her father's and she whispered, "It's beautiful." He looked down at her, eyes glistening. "So are you, Luna. So are you." That evening, when the world's noise faded, they returned home again. The fireplace crackled softly. The house smelled faintly of lavender and cocoa, and outside, the snow had started falling once more. Luna curled up beside him on the couch. Sketchbook open. "What are you drawing now?" he asked gently. She grinned. "A big house, but not for us. For everyone," he smiled. "You think everyone would fit?" She nodded firmly. "Yes, because it's made of kindness, and kindness is really big." He laughed softly, a real unguarded laugh he hadn't let out in years. Then she looked up at him, eyes suddenly serious. "Daddy, are you happy now?" He took a moment before answering. "I think I finally am, even though people were mean."
Yes, he said quietly.
"Because now they're learning, and that's what matters most." That night, after Luna had fallen asleep, Alexander stood in the doorway of her room, watching her breathe. Her stuffed bear lay tucked under her arm, her curls spilling across the pillow, her face peaceful, untouched by the weight of the world. He remembered the night she first arrived in his life. Small, scared, and unsure of her place. He remembered the promise he made to himself then, that he would protect her from the world. Now he realized he hadn't protected her from it. He'd helped her change it, and maybe that was better. He turned to leave, but paused when he noticed a crayon drawing pinned to her wall, one he hadn't seen before. It showed a crowd of smiling people standing under a big banner that read, "Everyone belongs." And at the center of the drawing, holding hands, were Luna and him. In the weeks that followed, the Luna Initiative spread beyond their city. Schools adopted its message. Corporations partnered with it. Politicians referenced it, but the true victory was quieter, found in the subtle changes of everyday life. A teacher catching herself before making an unfair assumption. A parent explaining kindness instead of anger. A stranger holding the door a little longer. Humanity, slowly but surely, was healing itself. And it all began with one little girl, with big eyes, a brave heart, and the courage to stand tall even when the world tried to make her feel small. Months later, at the grand opening of the Luna Center, the ribbon cutting drew hundreds of families. Children ran laughing through the halls, their voices echoing with joy. Reporters snapped photos. Drones buzzed overhead, but Luna didn't care about the attention. She was too busy handing out cookies to other kids, her laughter filling the air like music. Alexander watched her from a distance, not as a billionaire, not as a public figure, but as a father. And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel powerful because of what he owned. He felt powerful because of what he gave. As the sun set behind the new center, Luna came running toward him, cheeks flushed from play. "Daddy," she said breathlessly. "Look, and everyone's smiling." He followed her gaze, and parents, children, workers, strangers, and all laughing, all united, all together. He knelt down beside her, brushing a curl from her face. "You did this, you know," she giggled. "No, we did." And for the first time in a long, long while, her smile, and that bright, fearless smile, returned completely. It was more than forgiveness. More than healing. It was a beginning. A new world built not on money or fear or pride, but on love. And as the last light of day faded, that love burned brighter than anything else. Years passed. The world changed in ways no one could have predicted. Quietly at first, Then all at once, cities grew taller, brighter, and faster. But somewhere in the heart of it all stood a humble brick building wrapped in ivy, its windows glowing with warmth no matter the season. The sign above the door had faded slightly from time, but its meaning hadn't dimmed. The Luna Center, where every child belongs. The laughter of children still echoed through its halls, just as it had on the first day it opened. The smell of freshly baked bread and crayons still filled the air. But something was different now. The little girl whose name once graced the entrance had grown up. Luna Grant stepped out of a sleek black car and paused at the gate, her heels crunching softly against the gravel. Her curls, now longer and streaked with faint copper in the sunlight, framed a face that carried both grace and quiet strength. She stood still for a moment, staring at the sign. So much had changed, her life, the world, everything. Yet this place still felt like home. A small hand tugged at her sleeve. "Miss Luna, are you really the Luna?" a little boy asked, his eyes wide with awe. She smiled. "I think so. Why?" "My teacher says this place exists because of you," he said, shy but proud. "Is that true?" Luna knelt down, meeting his gaze. "It exists because of kids like you," she said softly. "I just helped a little." He grinned, showing a missing front tooth, and ran back to join his friends. Luna watched him go, and for a moment, she saw herself in him. The scared little girl in the mall, holding on to her father's hand, trying to understand why people could be so cruel. And then the next day, realizing that kindness could be louder. Inside, the center buzzed with life. Art classes, laughter, story time, and the rhythmic sound of piano lessons drifting from the music room. On the wall hung hundreds of photos, children, families, volunteers, and mentors. Each photo a story, each story a spark of change. In the center of it all was one framed picture larger than the rest. A young Luna holding hands with her adoptive father, both smiling under that very sign. Her breath caught. Even after all these years, his eyes in that photo still made her feel safe. Alexander Grant had passed away 5 years earlier, peacefully at home, surrounded by family. His last words to her had been simple: "Keep building, Luna, but build hearts, not walls." And she had. The Luna Initiative had grown into a global foundation. Schools, shelters, and centers across continents carried its message of unity. Her speeches were studied in universities, her work celebrated in conferences, but she never forgot why it all began. Because one day, a child had been humiliated in public, and one man refused to let that be the end of her story. As the afternoon light poured through the stained glass windows, Luna walked into her father's old office, now preserved as a quiet reflection room. His desk was still there, neat and orderly, the faint scent of cedarwood and coffee lingering in the air. On the desk sat a leather-bound notebook, one he used to write in every morning. She picked it up gently, flipping through the pages filled with his neat handwriting. One note caught her eye, written years before the mall incident. "Adoption doesn't mean giving someone a home. It means promising them they'll never be alone again." Her throat tightened. For a long moment she just stood there, tears blurring the words. Then, softly she whispered, "You kept your promise, Dad, and now I'm keeping mine." Outside, the evening air turned cool, carrying the smell of rain and blooming jasmine. Children were gathering around the bonfire pit, a tradition that began in the center's earliest days. Luna joined them, sitting among the circle of small faces glowing in the firelight. One little girl, clutching a handmade doll, leaned forward. "Miss Luna, can you tell us a story?" Luna smiled. "Sure, what kind of story?" The girl thought for a moment, then whispered, "A story where someone gets hurt but it ends happy." Luna's heart warmed. She nodded slowly. "I know one like that." She began to speak softly, her voice carrying over the crackle of the fire. "Once there was a little girl who felt like she didn't belong anywhere. People looked at her and saw something different, something they didn't understand. One day they laughed at her in front of everyone. She cried. But the next day something amazing happened. The children leaned closer, eyes wide, breaths held. Her father stood up for her, not just with words but with love. And because of that, the whole world changed. Maybe not all at once, but little by little it became kinder. Because that's what love does, it grows. When she finished, silence lingered for a moment. Then a boy whispered, "That's a good story." Luna smiled, tears glinting in her eyes. "It's a true story. As the children dispersed for dinner, Luna stayed by the fire a little longer. The sky had deepened into indigo, stars peeking through. She could almost feel her father there, in the warmth of the flames, in the laughter echoing around her, in the simple peace of knowing she had fulfilled his dream. She looked up and whispered, "You see it, don't you? They're happy. They're safe." And in the gentle rustle of the wind, she imagined his voice replying, "I told you, you were always meant to shine, my little Luna." When the night finally fell, she walked back to her car, the lights of the Luna Center glowing behind her like a beacon. Before stepping inside, she turned for one last look. Dozens of paper lanterns floated up into the night sky, a weekly ritual of hope started by the children. Each one carried a message written on it. One lantern drifted closest to her. She caught it gently, unfolding the small paper attached. It read, "Thank you, Luna, for making us believe we belong." She smiled in a soft, peaceful smile and let the lantern go, watching it rise higher and higher, until it disappeared among the stars. And somewhere beyond those stars, or maybe within her own heart, a father's pride and a little girl's courage burned on forever. Not as a story of pain, but as a story of love that rewrote the world.